You cannot kill the devil, Tenno. But you can send it back to hell.
Narmer has taken control. The Tenno have been defeated, and the remaining factions crumple under the weight of the sentient onslaught. The new war seems lost. That is until an unlikely ally emerges from the void. In this video, we're going to talk about who I believe is Warframe's greatest character, the Drifter. They serve as the perfect antithesis to the player character. They have no Warframes and no void powers, relying solely on their wits and the tools they've been given. They flip the standard Warframe narrative and gameplay formula on its head, and in doing so, actually provide an experience that Warframe hasn't provided for a long time. The Drifter is a simple, yet compelling character, and I believe they have an important place in the present and future of Warframe. First, I'm going to explore what I think makes them great in a narrative context, and then take a closer look at their gameplay. Following on from that, I want to explain how I think the character is being actively harmed by development choices and recent updates. I'll conclude the video by discussing some possible ways in which the Drifter could be improved and implemented in the future, in order to realize the character's potential. But first, a quick recap of the Drifter's story. Like the Operators, the Drifter's story begins on the Zariman after the failed Void jump. Now trapped in the Void, they encounter the Man in the Wall, a seemingly malevolent entity who is a personification of the Void itself. The Drifter, as an alternate character, comes into existence when the timeline splits after the Man in the Wall offers a deal to the Tenno. While one timeline would receive Void powers and freedom, the other would forsake a single child. This child would never be rescued with the others, and would grow up alone, forgotten on the Zariman. Whether this child declined the deal or accepted but was simply conned out of it, as a Duviri tablet implies, we don't know for sure. Seeking salvation, the world of Duviri came to life and protected who was now the Drifter. That is until they grew weary of the overbearing restriction. Once again, they were trapped and needed to escape. With the help of Teshin, the Drifter broke free from the spirals of Duviri and used their newfound freedom to enter the Origin system and decapitate the Narmer Empire. Now, let's start properly exploring the Drifter's character by discussing their narrative highlight in the Duviri Paradox quest. The Drifter's character arc tells a very real and human story. A survivor of the void-crazed Zariman and forsaken by rescue attempts, the Drifter was left traumatized, alone, and trapped. Eventually, their overwhelming desire for safety exceeded the function of the Tales of Duviri storybook. Conceptual embodiment brought Duviri to life and enclosed the Drifter in a shroud of safety within the void. They were safe, but perhaps too much so. Just as a safe environment was embodied by Duviri, the very desire for safety itself was embodied by Duviri's king, Dominus Thrax. Thrax had a chokehold on the Drifter, refusing to let them leave Duviri and enter harm's way. They were trapped once more. Ironically, this perverted desire was quite literally killing the Drifter repeatedly. Day after day spelled execution, and so they stopped caring. The Drifter held no regard for their own life, losing their emotional capacity and their self-worth. You could say that the spirals of Duviri serve as an analogy for feelings of inescapable hopelessness and apathy. It was only with the help of Natar's hand and Teshin's guidance that the Drifter was able to escape Duviri's endless loop and begin the healing process. I think this sends an excellent message. In times of poor mental health, you can't go it alone, and you'll need help. Those who care for you will help you to get better. Not only this, but in a game full of world-ending threats and fantastical conflicts, it's refreshing to see a story revolve around such a simple concept that's very easily relatable. Ultimately, this relatability helps to make the Drifter feel like a real, human character. Next, I want to talk about the Drifter's role in the New War and what makes them stand out among the Warframe cast. In a system full of endless armies and powerful figures, none could even come close to resisting the sentient Narmer onslaught during the New War. In just a day or two, Narmer's victory was inevitable. With the Tenno down for the count too, it was simply a matter of time. The New War had seemingly been lost. That was until the Drifter arrived. The Tenno, Grineer and Corpus combined couldn't win the fight, so for a regular human to show up and act as the sole catalyst that turned the tide of the war is incredible. Not only is the Drifter just a regular human, but they are the only one to play such a significant role in the main Warframe story. The Drifter's bravery and feats during the New War demonstrate that it wasn't the Void Powers or the Warframes that made this individual special, they simply had it in them all along. All it took was a way out of their Void-born prison. I think, like in Duviri's quest, the Drifter's character was used to portray a positive message. That is, there is no special ability or item you need to achieve great things. All you need is a noble cause, and that's exactly what the Drifter had. Take the confrontation with Hunhao for example. The Drifter walked right in, almost got killed, demanded information about the Archons, went to leave, called Hunhao out for sitting idly by as Narmer seized control, and then was given the Archon-killing Natarak.
A weapon as old as those you hunt.
The Drifter understood what it would have been like to have your freedom taken from you. Just as they were trapped in Duviri, Natar was trapped in Ballas and Era's scheme to rule over the system. Not only this, but to see Hunhao refuse to save his own daughter just as Teshin had saved the Drifter would have greatly upset them. Being her father, Hunhao had an even more urgent responsibility to help in restoring Natar's freedom. Only with the Drifter's reprimand did he choose to do so. He and the Drifter put aside their differences, recognised the threat at hand, and chose to cooperate for a greater good. The Drifter's job was done, no Void powers required. These two quests paint an intricate picture of the Drifter's nature, a troubled, jaded, yet empathetic victim of the Void's malevolence, trying to repay their debt and ultimately do what's right, without the help of the supernatural. To me, that's a damn well written character. Let's move on to discuss the Drifter's gameplay. I won't talk about Duviri Drifter gameplay much, as I've already done so in my previous video. Our focus will be on the Drifter in the New War, and in the New War, I think they're an incredibly fun character. I replayed it for the sake of getting footage, and I was pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed it this time around, especially considering I've played this quest about 25 times. I made an effort to play it stealthy, and it was a blast. I was sneaking through the Narmer outpost as a cloaked figure, taking out enemies one by one and saving Ostrons along the way. The overall mood felt so perfectly crafted. Part of what made this experience so incredible was the Drifter's kit, which plays really well into the theme of stealth and has excellent synergy. You use the target radar to locate the enemies around you, planning out your next immediate move. If the environment cannot provide the necessary cover, you've got a smoke screen at your disposal to remain concealed from the eyes of the enemy. It has a long cooldown however, so you need to plan your use of it wisely. Finally, should an encounter not go as cleanly as you'd like, you have a restorative to regain some health and clear status effects. Each ability has a significant impact on gameplay, the cooldown mechanic calling for extra skill and consideration in order to use them most effectively. These abilities make for a super fun kit, but they also positively contribute to the feel of the quest's second act. You're alone, and all you've got is your pistol, a dagger, and gear you've scavenged up to this point. You're staying hidden, think about how to take down each individual enemy as you encounter them, being careful not to get spotted or else you're in serious trouble. This leads me to my next point. The Drifter's gameplay heavily contrasts that of standard Warframe. You're not vaporizing hordes of enemies in seconds as an unstoppable machine, armed to the teeth with ludicrous weapons. You've got 250 health, no shields, 2 weapons, 3 eventually, and just 3 abilities on cooldowns. Surviving as the Drifter is harder, but that means it's both more rewarding when you do, and fair when you don't. You don't die because an enemy dealt too much damage in the time it took to cast your ability, or because you forgot to reactivate your 90% DR. You die because you were spotted by an enemy, or you got too cocky and thought you could take on a large group. This approach to combat is refreshing and fun, but doesn't really have a place in modern Warframe. That being said, this leaves the perfect opportunity for a stealthy drifter to be implemented further into the game, which we'll talk about later on. So, we've quite clearly established that the drifter being a regular human is what makes them such a compelling and entertaining character. They endure lifelike struggles, demonstrating that you don't need overwhelming amounts of power to make a difference. Not only this, but their more grounded, stealthy, and tactical approach to combat provides a refreshing player experience. Unfortunately, it seems this very essence of the drifter is being pushed to the wayside. This was partially done in Duviri, but again I've already spoken about that. Let's look at the major story quests following the New War. The drifter appears in two of them, Angels of the Zariman and Whispers in the Walls. In both of these quests, the drifter doesn't play as their own character. Rather, they're just a functionally equivalent stand-in for the operator. In all honesty, this was a terrible decision to make. In the New War, the drifter was unique, an interesting departure from typical Warframe, and was so much fun to play as. In both of these post-New War quests, they're a glorified operator skin. All the aspects that made this character interesting are being completely undermined. Their bravery doesn't matter anymore because they have void powers. There's nothing to be afraid of now, and so there is no way in which to be brave. Their reliance on a limited array of weapons and gear also doesn't matter anymore, because they have access to the entire Tenno arsenal. It just feels like such a disrespect to the character. There is the argument that, under the rules of eternalism, only the drifter or the operator can exist in space-time at once. This in itself is fine, but the problem arises specifically when the drifter is also able to use the operator's void powers. In this state, there is no reason for the drifter to be present aside from an aesthetic difference. Why is this the case? Is the drifter really just meant to be a different looking operator? If so, a major disservice has been done towards the character, and the only true version of them is in a 1-hour segment locked behind a 4-hour quest. If this is just an arbitrary novelty, why was the drifter once again used as an operator stand-in during the recent Whispers quest? This quest especially has made me very concerned that Warframe's next major story arc won't truly involve both the operator and the drifter, but rather just whichever version of the Tenno you choose to equip. If this is the case, then it would be an incredibly lazy decision, both in writing and in game development. This next point equally applies to the operator and the drifter. I noticed that in the Whispers quest, the player character has no dialogue, regardless of whether you play as the operator or drifter. This was yet another step in the wrong direction. Both during and after the New War, both characters had speaking roles. Why is it that they've returned to being silent? The operator hasn't even really been silent since the Second Dream, which was released almost a decade ago. Warframe's silent protagonist days are long over, and so it's inappropriate to dismiss years of character development for two of the game's most central characters. What makes this even more disappointing is that Whispers in the Walls is the mainline quest that directly follows on from the New War, so you go from the most dialogue-heavy quest in the game right into the least. This disparity makes for a really jarring narrative experience. If these trends are to continue, the drifter's identity and place in Warframe will be completely tarnished. While there are many ways in which the drifter's character has been poorly handled, there are of course opportunities for improvements and changes in the future to allow the drifter to keep their deserved place in the Warframe universe. The first, and most obvious, is for the drifter to return to fighting against Narmer. After all, it was their debut role. The New War counterpart could easily be reintroduced, unchanged, into new evergreen content. Perhaps this could be through new Break Narmer missions alongside Karl, or fighting in Narmer invasions on the star chart. Not only would this provide permanent access to the best version of the drifter, but it makes Narmer feel more present, which has especially been an issue since the release of the New War. On to the next point. While I do still think that the drifter is better suited for stealth than Souls-like melee, the latter can still definitely work. As long as the drifter's melee system is fixed and improved, then their versatility will be greatly improved also. The best way to implement this change would be to combine the drifter's health, abilities, and scaling from the New War with the expanded melee system from Duviri. Being even more ambitious, Teshin's elemental imbuement abilities could also be included as a hold to cast on top of the drifter's abilities. After all, the drifter was given Teshin swords, and this would enhance melee combat further. Overall, this would create a version of the Drifter capable of both rich melee combat and stealthy gameplay, which benefits player agency. In addition, this is done without compromising the theme of the character. There are no void powers, transference or warframes. The Drifter continues to rely on their wits and the gear they've been given to fight Narmer, Sentience and Duviri Dax alike. These points contribute to what should be the Drifter's ultimate purpose in Warframe, a complement to the Operator. Considering the fact that the Drifter is an alternate version of the Operator, I think it would be perfect for them to be a distinct, secondary character. Perhaps an area in a mission is covered by an Orphix field, requiring the Drifter to disable them. They could even have some sort of role to play in 1999 and more of the main questline, playing as their own character rather than as an Operator stand-in. There's really so much that can be done, it just depends on if it actually will be. Wrapping up, I really do believe the Drifter is Warframe's greatest character. They're very well written as far as Warframe characters go, providing us with an arc more compelling than that of any other character. A human, facing real struggles that players can easily sympathise with. Not only this, but the Drifter, especially in the New War, provides a gameplay experience unlike anything we really have in modern Warframe. Their slow, methodical and stealthy player style is, quite simply, a lot of fun. With this in mind, it's a shame to see the recent handling of the character. It feels like the Drifter isn't being given the respect they deserve, that they're not being allowed to stand on their own as an individual with their own impact on the storyline. My worst fear is that this trend continues and that the Drifter's potential is never realised. However, as discussed, there are avenues for future improvement. All we can do is hope that the developers hold the character in the appropriate regard. What do you think of the Drifter? Do you find them fun to play? Is the story enjoyable to you? What do you think could be done to improve the character? Let's discuss it in the comments. I'd also like to shout out the Warframe creators that have inspired me both in making this video and in general. With that being said, thank you very much for watching, and until next time.